this is first of all, this was I dug that up. It's been dug up for about 5 years now. It was further down on the Walbridge here. This was used to power his foundry. That was the water wheel that powered his foundry. Here it is now, and that was an intricate piece to that ran his machine shop and all the rest there. His lathes and all the rest, powered by a water wheel.
Francis always said I was the keeper of the facts. This is his card, and I will attempt to read it. It's very, very small writing. Here it is, Canada postcard on the back, and himself advertised on the front. It says A.S. Walbridge, General Founder and Machinist, manufacturer of portable and stationary steam engines. And then in very small writing, it says governors for engines and water wheels, engine and hand lathes, gear and bolt cutters, drills and drill lathes, iron planers, large circular sawmills, grist and sawmill gearing, shafting and pulleys, hangers with adjustable boxes, jack screws, cheese factory boilers, screws and pipes, tenoning molding, sticking and planing tongue and groove machines, Daniel and Woodworth's planers, mortising machines, shingle and clapboard machines, also the improved Kiffin mower, spiral, worm, and spur gears cut to order, Mystic, Quebec. All that on this little card.
Come on, let's go for a walk. Well, this has been here for years. It's been here for years. This where all started. All the bricks were fired here at this kiln that he made years and years ago. And what's left of the kiln is still here. And it needs a little bit of repairs, but with time we'll get it done.
Alexander Solomon Walbridge was born in 1828 in Mystic, which was not called Mystic at that point. It was called Clapperton because of the Clapperton family who lived here. Alexander Solomon Walbridge was born in a log cabin. His mother and father had arrived here and bought land. It was not a land grant to them. They had bought it in 1822. They arrived by wagon, of course, over very bad roads and got stuck along the way. They had 4 children, and they were living in a one-room cabin, very crude, very unlivable by our standards today, for sure. As a boy, he was very interested in mechanics and mill operation. At 18, he left home to study the profession of mill construction and foundry operation. As Edith Walbridge said one time, he was a genius, and she's absolutely right. He was a genius. As Danielle Pigeon says in her book, Mystic was humming So from the proceeds from his industrial complex, as they call this, that's when he started building the barn. He built the barn first, then the mansion in front of the barn. And the barn going up must have drawn a lot of curious viewers. It was 80 feet in diameter and 12-sided. I'm going to quote from Frances Walbridge, who heard this from her father, Alexander Walbridge's son, Ali. He intended to get his way. In other words, he was driven. There's also a story connected with the church that the local residents wanted this Methodist church, and they had collected money to build the church. They had collected $1,500. Well, he was quite disdainful of that. He told them for $1,500 they could not build a church they would be proud of. And there was quite a bit of infighting going on. Finally, he said, "Give me the money and I'll build you a church you can be proud of." In other words, he would absorb the rest of the cost. He also put a second story on the Mystic Schoolhouse, most of all because he wanted his children and the village children to have a higher education, which they only had a primary education in Mystic. He married Harriet Taylor from Pike River, and at that point he was 41 and she was 23. And when you see pictures of the family, she really does look like a young girl, which she was. And he looks, even though he was only in his 40s, he looks a lot older. Let's just put it that way. What happened to Alexander? Well, he had such a successful business, but at one point he did run afoul of the railway. He did a lot of work for the railway, and for some reason, at one point, they did not pay him, and he had to bring a lawsuit. So there was a court case, and Ali Walbridge and the other people who brought this lawsuit against, I think it had been bought by CP at this point, lost. They lost the lawsuit. So Ali did not get paid for, say, a year's work. But the thing was, there was politics behind this, and because the government backed the railroads, the railroads could not lose. They could not, and he lost. He lost a lot. And I think that might have been that might have been the beginning of the end. At some point, I believe he was only 69 years old. In about 1897, he had a fatal accident, and he lived for about 4 days after that, and he was deceased. At that point, Ali was only 13 years old. Most of the family moved to Montreal. The sisters did. Some of the sisters did later become world travelers. His wife attempted to keep the business running, which she did for about 3 years, but without the advertising, without Alexander Solomon's knowledge of how to train his workers, how to lead his workers, how to keep the products rolling. This was a losing cause. And on top of that, of course, women were not trained to to take over their husband's business, or in fact to run any business. When Frances would tell me these stories, this would go on for hours. She could talk for hours about family history and things that happened and things that didn't happen. Yes, she's one of Allie's children. So Frances was the oldest, and then there was Edith was next, and Stephen was next, and Dorothy was next. Frances became a teacher. It was always her dream to go to Africa. Finally, when she was 30 or near to 30, she got the okay that she could go to Africa and be a missionary teacher. She stayed past retirement age because she didn't want to leave. But there was a horrible war going on in Angola where she lived. So she went to Zaire, where she spent another couple of years. And then the sisters wrote to her and told her, you're past retirement age. You have to come home and look after Dad. We've been looking after him all this time. It's your turn. Come home. And that's when she came home.
Well, to start with, of course, it's the family. And as you know, the Walbridge family has owned the property for 200 years. Back in the day, it was Solomon Walbridge, and then his son Solomon came along a year after. And then his son Ali didn't own the property. The property was left to his children, which are Steve, Edith, Frances, and Dorothy. But the interesting thing was that the four family members, the siblings, they visited out here because their father worked in Montreal, and they came out most weekends and enjoyed the property and everything that went on. And as time went on, Ali got older, and Steve was taking the leadership of the family. And they were walking around, about 1973, 74, wondering what would happen to the property. And they decided that they would make a company, which would include all the family members and guarantee the ownership in perpetuity. And as time went on, they realized they were getting older. They were up in their 80s. And so they invited some members of Mystic, some families here, to join with them to help look after the property. And there were four families that were invited. There was Karen and myself, Stan Soul and Carol Soul, Danny and Shelley Smith, Pat Note, and Eric and Martha Tompkinson. So we were invited into the company in 1998. And in 1999, they had the sagesse to make me president. Anyway, then we began to look at what they wanted to do and how we were going to do it. So one of the first things they wanted to do was put the barn back in good shape. And part of the idea of that was so the museum could use it for their agricultural display. Well, as a private company, it's not easy to find financing for projects. So we began looking into forming the foundation. And in 2004, the company transferred all the assets to the foundation. And the foundation was basically the same people, and it's the Walbridge Conservation Area Foundation. I guess it was in 2006 the barn was classified as a heritage building. And we were starting to look for funding in 2007, 2008. So we were able to start the renovation of the barn, which started with the foundations and then straightening up the building and then doing the interior work. And this was all done by Bill Corey, who was a native of Mystic. And his previous experience was straightening up the West Brome round barn, which was quite a feat in itself. Bill spent 3 years renovating the barn, completely inside and out. And the turntable inside, we couldn't replicate what they had before, which was a suspended turntable. So he came up with an idea to support it using a mechanical shovel underneath, and it turns and it's perfectly balanced. But if you look up above, you see how high the ceiling is in the center. Well, he had to do all of that work, building scaffolding and so on, summer and winter. And then he had to redo the exterior roof, and they insisted that it be done in 1-foot squares like it would have been done previously. So we had to have those manufactured locally. But it was very interesting. He just kept plugging along, one thing at a time, and the barn is in excellent condition, and it's good for many years to come. And the beauty of it is, of course, the museum's agricultural display inside. The next thing was the Mystic United Church. That was 2006. Steve came with the idea that we take over the maintenance of the church because the congregation was reduced, and make it part of the Walbridge Foundation. So we negotiated with the church, and we bought the church for $1 with the obligation that we must maintain it and keep it available to the church to be used at no expense. So we've been doing that since 2006. In 2019, the Mystic Schoolhouse, which was operated as a separate organization, had reduced volunteers, and so they approached us about taking it over. We've got the historical buildings here protected. We have the land protected. We have the museum operating well. And of course, for the 200th anniversary, Danny Patnode, who looks after the property and grew up here in Mystic, and it's a part of his being, wanted to build a covered bridge where we have the bridge over the creek for the 200th anniversary. So he and his wife and another couple, Sylvain Julie, spent 8 Saturdays and built this lovely covered bridge.
Well, it took, I wanted to compete with Solomon there because he put a second floor on the schoolhouse in 2 days. So I tried to compete with him, but I couldn't do it. It took us 8 days to do it, the bridge. We're standing right now at the moment in front of the Walbridge barn that was constructed by Solomon Walbridge back in the 1800s. My name is Danny Patnode. I've been living in Mystic since 1952. I was born here. I was born and raised just outside of Mystic, but I've always been involved with the Walbridge family since the age of 10 years old. I hung around with the Neer family. Harold Neer married a Walbridge, one of the Walbridges. She was one of the three sisters, the Walbridge sisters. And Duffy, she had three kids, Wendy, Bruce, and Jimmy. And we hung around together. That I played in the barn with them. We played hide and seek, and we'd jump off the beams into the hay mows, and we were just hanging around as young people would do back in the 1960s. You know, it's just we'd play in the barn, and that was the big things that are going to around. We swung off the ropes in the barn and all the rest into the hay mow.
When they were digging the ponds for the water treatment, they found these big rocks. They said, "What should we do with them? Bury them?" And I said, "No, make a pile." And the pile of rocks is Fran's garden, because Fran always looked out and she wanted it always to be the natural flowers and so on. So with that, we put in a nice flower garden, and that's Fran's garden.
And she always called it Mystic Stonehenge.
Mystic Stonehenge.
Kind of looks like.
Yeah, we see Grace, of course, spent a lot of time with Frances and going over things with her and documenting, and yeah.
Frances had asked me to catalog her antiques. So that's how I started going there every day. I think I had always known about her, but after I retired, and I was helping my mom and dad at that time, it was just so interesting to come to Frances' house and to just listen for hours to these stories. And I didn't mind listening. I was not bored. And she loved to talk. And she loved to talk about the past. I also come from a long line of American immigrants to Canada. And what artifacts I have from them are very few. And for me to see all these Walbridge artifacts of anywhere from dishes to clothing to everything, buildings, land, you know, it just made me think, well, this is solid. And when Frances asked me to catalog her antiques, which were like books, paper, so much paper, pictures, I was all in with that. Listening to Frances was like taking a university course in history every day. And that was, I guess that's what I needed at the time. And yeah, so I helped her and she helped me, actually. Also, she began to need help then. And I thought to myself, she spent all her life helping others in a selfless way. Like, she never got married. She never had her own family. And now that she's old and needs some help, everybody who goes there to help her has to be paid. And I thought, she deserves somebody who would just listen to her and listen to her stories. And I'll be that person, and I'll what I'll receive back is all this history. So I would drive her around to her friends where she wanted to go, and so many hours I spent. I did. When I start talking about her in a personal way, I still miss her after all this time. It was 2010 when she died. She was 99 years old. Yeah. And her schoolhouse where she taught in Africa, in a little village called Dundee, during their civil war, that schoolhouse was burnt down. And during the last couple of years of her lifetime, that schoolhouse was rebuilt. And so she got to see that in pictures. So that was two of her dreams, to see Dondi rebuilt and the barn rebuilt. I think he would be appalled that his mansion is gone, but I think he would be so pleased that the barn is still there after, what is it, 140 years? 140 plus years. The barn is still there and looking really fine.
Well, first, what you have to think about is that I'm a neighbor. Okay, I came here in 1968, and we became friends with the Walbridge family. Karen used to ride horses with Ito on the property here, and well, we just enjoyed their company, and the things that they wanted to do were good for us in the village. And so we thought, well, how can we help? But it had meaning because it was affecting us all here in the village. And each time we were able to do something, we felt good about it. And of course, now we have the natural reserve, you have the museum, you have the church, you have the schoolhouse, and they're all in good shape. And I like to think part of that is because I was able to help.
Well, we can walk like the Walbridges.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, Grace, you can walk like the Walbridges. You got to spraddle back and forth. Leroy, come here.
I was sure that section was right behind him.
Nope.
There.
I'm sure with it was. It's going to be here for years, this Grace.
Oh, I believe it.
Oh, it's going to be here
I
for
believe it.
I want to build a sign there. I just got to get the right piece of wood for the sign to make a sign.